dick butt.
You know, you really want to talk, though, about having answers.
Oh, yeah, I know. I don't have an answer at all.
Dave has tons of answers. He just doesn't know them right now.
We'll get to them eventually.
That's my academic career.
Yes, it is.
City.
Struggle City.
Remember when I used to sing in the beginning?
I forgot.
I remember when you rapped. I still have all those
I
files.
rapped.
Oh,
You
you
did rap.
did.
I did?
Yeah.
Oh my god. That's
I have
so
that
bad.
same.
It was one of the worst things I've ever heard.
Did I sound super white?
a literal dumpster
You were
fire.
so white, I had to put sunglasses on.
In West Struggle City, born and raised.
And then this happened.
I didn't do that. But you have to let me listen to it after this.
On the
because I don't
playgrounds where I
remember.
spent most of my days.
Chilling out.
Relaxing.
Yeah.
Recording all cool. Shooting some
people.
bullshit outside of the school.
God, I hate
What a
Will Smith.
couple
I
of
hate Will
guys.
Smith
So
so
we're up to
much.
no good. Why are you struggling over here in my neighborhood?
I got in one little fight. My mama got scared.
Said you're struggling with your auntie and uncle in Bel Air.
Oh my god. Let's move on quickly.
Speaking of instant classics.
That was a good segue. We're talking about classics today. What makes a classic? What are classics? What should be classics in terms of books and
I don't
movies?
wanna
And TV
participate
shows.
anymore.
Yes, and TV shows. And this was actually Casey's idea, kind of, but it was also Dave's idea way in the beginning.
It was my idea first.
I don't want to participate in this after that.
I'm sorry.
Well,
I
too
feel,
bad.
I feel gross.
Yeah.
You're on this boat unless you're jumping off
Swim.
and dying.
I'm already
Swim.
dead. I died when you were singing that.
We were rapping, actually.
It was actually a rap. It was poetry, okay?
Oh, like fucking slam poetry?
it was dumpster poetry.
Or what? Well, most poetry is dumpster poetry.
Anyway.
Not like poetry.
So poetry is not on Mrs. list of classics.
No, it is not. Actually, that's not 100% true.
It is 100% true. You heard it here.
No, it's really not. Because
Alright.
there's classic poems.
So,
I just don't like them.
like, what would you consider to be
I don't like this aggression, Dave.
the
Stop
the,
gesturing at me, Dave.
the epitome of a classic?
Put your hands down, Dave.
Okay, so
Hands at 10 and 2. Good job.
Let's just say I'm Horatioing it.
stop it.
It's
Oh
not the
my
only
God.
fellatio I do.
Oh. Okay.
Horatio fellatio.
Yeah, no. I anyway.
So
Fuck.
okay, so I'm wondering then if like the criteria for being a classic is the same for all types of media.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think regardless of the content or the format, relevance and I guess context too, how well it can fit into any given setting in a decade.
I think that is like a huge factor in what makes a classic.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to relate to something no matter what. Like Outsiders.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't relate to that, but I can see why. I can see why people do.
I don't know if that's really considered a classic though.
It is.
It is.
It?
Yeah,
It's
it is
absolutely
considered.
considered a classic.
That's interesting because I wouldn't consider it a classic, honestly.
I wouldn't consider it a book.
Oof. Hot takes with Casey.
Fucking smile. Just the way you looked at him, you're like.
But yeah, no, I agree. The level of relevance then and now.
Yeah.
So like
When
that,
it was written and 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, later.
that also brings into question, when does a book become a classic? Air quotes a classic.
Yeah.
Like The Outsiders, that was written during the 80s?
I don't know.
It's your favorite fucking
No,
book.
shit, 70s, I think.
Hang on, I wrote it down somewhere.
Because that movie came out in the 80s,
Yes,
so
it
it
did.
couldn't have come
Did it
out at the
really?
same
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, well, Patrick Swayze was in this one.
Yeah,
It
before
was an 80s gangbang.
Oh, no, I
What?
wrote it was set in 65.
It was set then, but he was asking when it was
When it
written.
was written.
Right. I got that.
Oh,
Everybody talk while I look stuff up.
okay. Yeah.
Movie came out in 1983.
1967.
Yeah. So it was written 2 years after it was set.
Oh, okay.
Well, it was published 2 years after it was set.
Right. Because nobody wants to listen to women.
Oh my god. Well, that's why she
S.E. Hinton.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fooled my 8th grade mind.
I don't even think I considered it, honestly. Like, the author at that point. I was just kind of so involved with the story. But, see, the idea of a classic for me, yes, it has to be relevant, but it's more about, like, the personal aspects of it. Like, I have to be able to, like, it has to be able to touch me in a way that other books or movies haven't.
Okay.
In order for it to be a classic in my head.
Yeah.
But I know that's not how it works for...
Because I think it has to have just a huge impact. It has to have a huge public impact, huge public appeal.
Because the first thing that came to mind for me...
Or even controversy. Like...
Yeah, it doesn't. It can be a negative or positive.
Like, William Burroughs, his book Naked Lunch. He wrote that after he accidentally, not accidentally, he was high as shit, and then murdered his wife.
Oh.
Yeah, and then that book is basically like a little autobiographical in that aspect because the author or the character in the book does the same thing. So that's kind of a classic because there's all that behind it.
It's controversial and it carries a lot of weight.
Yeah, like Ginsberg and Howell.
But see, there are some classics that just don't deserve to be classics, in my opinion, because of how bad it sucked. Catcher in the Rye, for example.
Oh, that's an awful book.
It is. But for some reason, it's considered a classic.
Catcher in the Rye is the coming-of-age story, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But
hardly.
I think it's more because of Salinger. Just because of how reclusive and mysterious he kind of made himself be. Mm-hmm. And there's more about him almost ascending to this weird legendary status.
But, okay, so then it's more about the author instead of the actual context and the story.
Yeah.
That's not fair in terms of what makes a classic, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the book is just really junky and doesn't really offer much to anybody. It's very much set for the people that were of that time. Mm-hmm. It's not generational.
Everybody's a phony.
And, fun fact, J.D. Salinger's son, Matt Salinger, was an actor, was in Revenge of the Nerds. He was Ogre.
No way.
Yes. It gets weirder. He was also Captain America.
Fuck that.
In the first two.
In the first two.
In the 90s, the late 80s, 90s adaptations.
Yes.
Arguably more successful than his dad, in my opinion.
Fun fact.
That is a fun fact.
So I want to complicate things a little bit, right off the bat.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not. So if this idea of not being able to separate literature from the author, in order for it to be considered a classic is a very light term. Mm-hmm. Would you still consider Catcher in the Rye a classic because of the author, or are we?
I think it's one of those instances where the author is shadowing so much over his own work. Because nobody talks about his other works.
Correct.
Nobody talks about 9 Stories. Nobody talks about Franny and Zoe. Everybody talks about Catcher in the Rye.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And the two are just so intrinsically linked.
Well, it was also banned for a little bit in
because of language.
Right, so that was like a big thing,
and
too.
hookers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hookers.
He didn't have sex with her, though, right?
No. He tried to, talk down and belittle her, and then her pimp came in and beat the shit out of him and took his money.
I didn't remember that part, but alright.
Yeah.
Never read it, so this is a trip.
I remember there was something about a carousel, wasn't there? Besides the cover of the book.
What?
Like he ran away.
Took his sister to it, I think.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
I haven't read it since freshman year of high school.
Yeah, because it was stupid.
It was awful.
It was so bad.
The next thing that comes to mind, now this is a personal opinion.
So it's wrong.
I don't like Jane Austen. But
that's fair.
I understand the importance of her work.
I don't know anything about Jane Austen.
She's basically credited with one of the first novels.
She made a successful career out of writing the same book 6 or 7 times.
I remember everybody saying how much they hate her, except for one person who really liked her.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Tom.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it's the same story over and over and over again. While I agree that if it was just once, it would have been
once is fine,
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But she just kept recycling tropes and archetypes, and even plots, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, the only one that really differs at all, I would say, is Emma. And it differs so minusculely that it's minuscule.
I would say Mansfield Park is a bigger deviation.
That was my other one I had in mind, too.
And I actually kind of enjoyed Mansfield Park.
Mansfield Park.
Mansfield Park.
Oh my goodness.
She definitely was a serial killer.
Poor Rampelli.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to...
But I feel like she has ascended to that level of importance that her novels
She's very much on a pedestal.
It's the fact that she created the novel.
So then is she the classic, or are her books the classics?
Both. Because I feel like this is another instance of, despite the artist being linked to the product, they've both kind of reached.
They both have ascended, and they've become separate. Because when I think Jane Austen, I think strong, independent woman, writer.
You don't need no man.
Yeah.
Until the last act to wrap up the story.
Exactly. Because women can't make money during this time period. And basically, an inventor of the novels.
Yeah, inventor of a genre.
Yeah, an entire genre. So that's what I associate with Jane Austen. But her novels, I only associate marriage plot, classist discussion.
Classism hits you over the head.
Over and
Every
over again.
page hits you.
She ran through the mud.
Yeah.
Because that's wrong.
That's going back to Earth. That's returning to the Earth. That's returning to nature.
Oh my god, I'm reading too much into this, and I didn't even read this.
Oh, it's so bad. There's probably 2 out of her 7 novels that I would consider to be truly classic.
But okay, so she's an example of how she and her work are both classics compared to The Outsiders, where the book may be a classic, but she's not.
No, she's forgotten. S.E.
Yeah.
Hinton is legit forgotten. She wrote other books.
She wrote one other book that I know of.
Rumblefish and something else.
That was them. This is now.
Yeah. So I don't remember what the other one is.
It's garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute garbage.
Yeah.
And that begs another question is, was The Outsiders a fluke?
No.
Alright.
Anyway.
So, I feel like even Jane Austen, this monolith of a human being in classic literature, had 1, maybe 2 decent novels where she really hit hard, but the rest of them were all flat. And I would say Pride and Prejudice. She did the marriage plot really, really well, and she did relationships very well. And
because it was neater than Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah. And I'd probably argue for Emma, because
that's
that's
fair.
not exactly marriage plot driven. It is more relationship driven.
Yeah.
So I would argue those 2, she really knocked it out of the park, but the other ones all fell flat. But they're all well known. And I forget where I was going with this. Not being a one-hit wonder,
Right.
like S.E. Hinton.
Right.
I'm trying to think. Shelley, Mary Shelley, one-hit wonder. She struck gold with Frankenstein.
She created a genre.
Yeah, absolutely christened it and knocked it out of the park.
Right.
But what else do you know by her?
I know that she
Nothing.
died eventually.
Yeah, she died, and that her.
There was a weird thing going on with her and her husband and another poet. I forget his name.
Bird, I believe.
Byron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they were all in the. That's when Frankenstein was created. Was at this weird slumber party.
Yes.
Yeah, and they didn't take her seriously, and
Well, yeah, because woman.
yeah, but look what she created. So then, go ahead.
Oh, I was also going to say that her parents were also very famous writers.
Yes, they were.
So
and her husband, for some reason, Percy Shelley got a lot more.
He sucked.
Yeah.
I hated him.
Although I think he was the one that wrote Ozymandias, which is a really good poem.
Disagree.
I like Ozymandias.
I disagree. I disagree with you liking it.
Oof.
Okay, so then one-hit wonders, then to kind of go in the complete opposite direction. So if you were to look at Stephen King, what classics?
Who arguably peaked in the 70s.
Sure.
Big peaks.
Well, okay, so out of his dozens upon dozens, so you would consider that a classic.
Yes.
So my first thought would be The Shining.
Ooh, okay.
Okay.
My first thought would be Carrie.
Carrie's a stronger contender
Carrie, yeah.
than The Shining, but I'm going to still argue for It.
Okay.
Because Carrie is his first, or one of his earliest.
Yeah.
It feels like the this is the peak. This is where he peaked.
Okay.
Despite my love for the Dark Tower series, it's got its issues, but like I still think as a contained story, it is the best he'll ever be. And I've also just recently read The Shining. Most of The Shining is great. Some parts of it are stupid. And I can see why Kubrick did the things he did when he made the movie.
Pissed him off.
And it made the movie all the better.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
the movie was good.
Killer topiaries are not fucking scary.
No.
It was stupid.
Harry Potter did those.
And it was stupid. But there's an incompleteness to The Shining, I think.
Well, I mean, you don't have to like it for it to be considered a classic, though.
Right.
No.
So, like, when it comes to Stephen King, and, like, if you were to argue between it and The Shining, which one's a classic, I like it better than The Shining.
But did you read the book?
No, I did not. But the thing is, like, it was also just remade, like, redone. Like, so it's obviously still relevant.
Yeah. It the film.
Yes.
Right.
Let's clarify that.
Yes.
Because we went
Not
from
the
talking about books to talking about film, so
Yeah.
distinguish between
Doing
the two.
a quick...
But I feel like when people think about, like, The Shining versus It, let's just think about the movie then, for example. They would think of it as being this horror movie, which, yes, The Shining is too, but it's more psychological.
Yes. But it's different horrors.
Yes.
The Shining is horrors of a paternal relationship. And it is the horrors of childhood and growing up and moving on. Or the inability to move on in some cases. I will still contend that even in film form, you know what? No.
Yeah.
Because in film form, The Shining is the stronger contender. Because it's a more solid, more concrete idea. More than killer, sexy, space clown thing that could be anything.
And it's already stood a lot of the test of time. It's already been weathered and, drawn out.
Right.
So it's already cemented itself pretty well in film history, as a good all-around film.
It's one of the greatest horror films ever made, The Shining.
Yeah, so I'll argue with that.
I also feel like if it's been like made fun of or like used as like a parody in like other TV shows.
Oh yeah, because imitation
classic.
is the highest form of flattery.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like South Park. They did a whole thing on The Shining.
Oh, with Blockbuster?
Yeah.
I forgot about that. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah, I feel like if you make it on South Park, you're pretty solid.
Yeah.
At least now.
Like, you don't see good lampooning of it a lot because that's a tough one to do. You can make references,
Yeah.
but The Shining has a lot more to work with, I think.
Yeah.
And it's because of how relatable it is. Because it's not... Well, you said the father-son or father-child relationship is like the concrete, the center.
Yeah.
And the idea of isolation in general.
And isolation. Those are all fundamental to a lot of classic writing.
And it's a great contained story because it's all at the hotel.
Mm.
It's minus the bits where you're jumping back with Dick Halloran, the chef.
Oh,
But
shit.
see, I think that a lot of classics deal with that psychological aspect. Like, they really get in there. Like, compared to it, it's not really this... Yes, it is psychological, but it's more like, here's this entity that is going to attack. You know what I mean? Versus, like, when you're at the hotel, everything was fine originally, and then the psychological horror started. Yes, Casey.
For the movie, yes. It, the book, delves into the psyche of all the characters, of all the kids. You get to know these kids. You get to know them as adults. And that's why I still vote for It, the book.
Okay.
Because it not only does it build a fucking world, it builds this town, it builds these people. And they are, for all intents and purposes, they are real people. And I will argue that they are realer people than Jack Torrance in The Shining.
Sure.
Yeah.
I couldn't finish that book.
The Shining?
Yeah, I was so bored.
It's great. I think it's a great book, but it's not it.
No, I see what you're saying. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is a more complete bookend to bookend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a
Yeah.
contained universe, while the Shining novel is not as complete.
Right.
Where there
Like
are sequels that come before and after it. No, it's prequels, right? No, it's sequels. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Doctor Sleep, and then
Sleep's a sequel.
It's a sequel. So there is an expansion upon that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't complete there.
You
But there's-
not necessarily. No, The Shining is a complete story.
But they found that they can
Doctor
continue
Sleep's
it
a
on.
cash grab.
Yeah. But they can continue on the story. Like, how could you continue on it?
You can't.
You
You
can't.
can.
You can.
Pennywise doesn't die.
But why would you rewrite another story?
Like
with
it's
Pennywise.
fine on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't.
Yeah,
need
it doesn't
to be
need anything else.
Yeah.
But
Right.
Pennywise never died.
Yes.
He peaks up in everything else King has written.
But that's
He
the
does?
point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He shows up in Dreamcatcher. He shows up very briefly during the Dark Tower.
Although the Dark Tower is infamous for all their freaking cameos.
Dark Tower's great.
I want to read it. I haven't gotten to it yet.
Bonkers.
Harry Potter also makes a reference in there with a golden snitch.
Oh yeah, in the
Yeah.
Dark, and Star Wars.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Star
And
Wars
Stephen
then,
King.
for example, like that whole franchise is considered a classic.
Ooh, and I can tell you why.
Because it's
Because the hero's journey.
and it's the easiest thing to formulate a story around.
Yeah.
And
Because
also, Star Wars aped off of Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah.
Big time.
but it did it better. Well, more successful, I
Yeah.
should say, because better is
Because
subjective.
Kurosawa's version, The Hidden Fortress, is a great movie. It's funnier. It's more exciting.
And it comes down to this. I feel like just the idea of just having sequels,
And it's, franchisability.
franchisability, detracts a little bit from it for me.
Mhm.
For classic, for being a classic, because
Yeah.
you have to continue adding on and reiterating, and adding
Well,
on to this lore.
It wasn't going to be.
He had the first 3 scripts written,
Right.
so and that was where
And then that was it.
that was his intention to end it there. But then he got a bug up his ass and decided to do a prequel trilogy.
No, the bug up his ass started. George Lucas's ass started when he released those redone versions of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
That's what started it, because he realized that the technology was there to just fuck up everything,
Yeah. Yeah. And
and that's how we got the prequels, and that's how we got this new trilogy.
it comes down to the hero's journey. I feel like
It's-
that's what made it a classic, and
The original
Campbell's,
3, yes.
and Campbell's stamp on it, saying that this was a very good modernization of the hero story. Because Joseph Campbell did put his thumbs up and his approval.
Because that's his theory. That was his bread and butter.
Yeah, and he fucking had him on set
Mhm.
while he was writing the shit. So it's like he's pulling this information from the guy
For the
who-
original 3, yeah.
for the original.
not during the writing of the prequels.
But then, okay, so the movies are considered classics,
Mhm.
but what about the books? Because I don't ever hear
There's no
or
books.
I thought there were. I thought there were books.
There's novelizations of
Yeah,
the
there's
movie.
there's novelizations of the movies, but then there's the extended universe.
which are
For
independent,
fuck's sake, I hate Star Wars.
and that's no longer matters because
Yeah.
Disney went, "Fuck you, independent writers.
Mhm.
Your canon doesn't matter to the
Right.
story."
Like, people that love the movies enough wrote their own editions,
I
and
could have sworn there were books, but
there are books, but they're
yeah,
just
it's novelizations
Yeah.
of the movie, which is just a script in novel form
okay.
for more money.
Oh, everything's about money. All right, so what about Jaws? That's a classic.
it's awful.
You hardly ever see the shark
I-
because again, it's all about the psychological.
I think it's a good classic movie because of you hardly see the shark, and then the score on top of that. I feel like it's a good suspenseful movie, and it's a good.
Well, that adds to Star Wars too because the music behind all of that.
John Williams.
Second most nominated individual under Disney.
Jaws is 3 hours of bullshit and a fucking cello.
It's my dad's favorite movie,
Bullshit and a fucking cello.
but it's a classic.
Yeah, I again, I can see why, but I also dislike Steven Spielberg tremendously.
That's fair.
I think he's kind of a hack.
What about The Notebook?
Awful.
That's a classic.
It is a classic because people love mawkish, touchy-feely Hallmark soap opera bullshit.
I feel like the movie. Yes, I'm going to be very specific about
the movie. Is a classic.
The movie is a classic
the
because
writing is forgotten.
It kind of re-jump started this idea of romance films, and it gave them a new formula to play with.
It jump started the idea of putting two white people on a poster and just putting them close enough to kiss, but not close enough.
It's what Jane Austen did to the novel, I believe. The Notebook did to romance.
And
well, it was also that idea of like forbidden love.
Yes,
they didn't want her to be with him.
Yeah,
and also nobody wants to talk about Nicholas Sparks because he's a crazy Christian nutjob.
Yeah, so we'll just ignore the books. The movie is where it's at.
Well, it's funny because the way that it started, like if I had just watched The Notebook like for the first time recently, I probably wouldn't like it because the whole beginning, he was basically going to kill himself unless she went out with him, and that is against her will. She did not want to go out with him, and he made her do it.
That's so romantic.
But it's not.
So John Green.
So yeah, I wouldn't like that idea now, but you know,
no,
it's the idea of a story within a story too, though.
Yeah,
because the whole thing is from her journal or whatever. You alright, Dave?
Yeah, I'm dying. It's fine.
Okay.
Don't die on my sofa.
I'll die on the floor.
That's where he masturbates.
I don't want to damper that.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think of other.
Alright, so I guess I want to explore this idea of the author versus the novel. And less of a one-hit wonder, but F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Gatsby.
Yeah.
Gatsby.
He's very much a one-hit wonder.
Oh, what was the other novel he wrote?
Exactly, you can't even think of it.
No, there's a name.
Tender as the Night?
No.
The Damned and the Beautiful? Or something? Is that the title?
No. I'm confused with another author. It's like about God.
That's helpful.
That's super helpful. That's
All right.
real great. Anyway, so...
We'll put a pinpoint in this and I'll come back. Hold on.
So my idea of like a modern classic, and something I think... Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's still somewhat relevant. Maybe, I wouldn't say long, it wouldn't be any more relevant than maybe like 10 years down the line. But I know you love it to death.
Oh God. What?
Call Me By Your Name.
Fuck you.
I was thinking of another novel.
What were you thinking of?
Well, the
Did
novel...
you already forget it?
No, the novel... I don't remember the name of the novel, but the one that I was thinking of, This Side of Paradise, does not fit up. I was thinking of the one in Frankenstein, and that was previous to Fitzgerald. So it was just a mix-up of people.
Call Me By Your Name is not a classic.
I think it has the potential because I think it's tremendously relatable to a lot of people. Homosexuality aside, Elio and his introversion and his anxieties, I think are ridiculously relatable. And I think if it has a wider audience, yes.
Well, let me ask you this question because in school you read a lot of classic books.
Yeah.
And so then do you think that would ever be taught in a school?
I think it could absolutely be taught.
I think you're nuts.
I think it absolutely could be taught.
I think you're crazy.
Why?
Because
he jerks off into a peach.
I don't think it's too crazy for college.
Yeah.
For college, maybe, but
high school,
not high school.
Absolutely not.
For college, well, I guess it depends on the high school.
They wouldn't be able to. They're not mature enough for that. They wouldn't understand.
What books are on the banned list because they said fuck? Like,
yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think it could absolutely be taught in a college setting. But I think, like I said, like maybe 10 years down the line, it'll reach some sort of larger status.
Maybe like an LGBTQ plus class or something of the same vein.
Yeah, because
I've never read it.
It's not like it's exploitative. It's not overly explicit. But
It's interesting. I will say I agree with you with the anxieties.
Mm-hmm.
That was very realistic and very relatable.
Yes.
But other than that, I really don't think
I think
that
it
will
could.
be a classic. Because you know what? It's been out for some time.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it would have already made a bigger impact than it has.
I mean, it has a sequel too.
Okay, but let me ask you this then. As much as I don't think this is a classic, but it made a huge impact being like the fucking Twilight series. That made a giant impact and everybody
It could
knew
be.
about that. It shouldn't, but yeah, it could be.
It could be.
It could be.
Because
it's a love story.
It's also very dated.
Yeah, I don't because
But
of the
it's
fact that it's
still-
so dated.
It's a niche classic.
But my point being, it made a huge impact, and everybody knew about it. I don't really think...
Well, it made an impact, but it's shallow, stupid, juvenile garbage.
But it made an impact, is what I'm saying. Call Me By Your Name did not make an impact.
Yeah.
I think within communities it did.
I doubt it.
What's your point, Dave?
Okay, so on this idea of making an impact, would you say the Harry Potter series?
It's unfortunately become a classic, yes.
10 more minutes.
It's unfortunately become a classic.
But it also touches a lot on corruption in government and classism and racism and...
It's also kind of like a coming-of-age story.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it has all those potentials for... it has the ingredients for a classic.
It's easy for people to grasp onto and inject their own meanings into.
Like, Great Gatsby. I feel like that's another one that is really easy to inject meanings into.
Oh, yeah.
But
Great Gatsby at least has a point. Great Gatsby has a place.
I still haven't read it.
It's okay.
I mean, alright, so in that same vein, what's the point and the place of, like, The Lord of the Rings? Because those were,
That's a classic.
like, absolute garbage writing, in my opinion.
I think the point for Lord of the Rings has passed. And that's why Harry Potter is a thing. That need for that fantasy world.
And still it being
because
like
it's
journey.
yeah.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like that idea of trends in fashion and music being cyclical. Trends in literature are also cyclical. So the need for that fantasy world, that need for that heavy escapism is there.
So then I wonder, is that the reason why the Bible is also a classic?
Yes, because it's
100%.
it's dumb mythological escapism.
But to some people, it's real.
Right, and all those mythologies used to be real to people.
Yeah, the Bible is a perfect example of free verse and the hero's tale and, well, hero's journey. It's like it has all the culminations of what would be considered a classic.
And honestly, it's going to be mythology somewhere down the line.
I don't know.
Because something
just
even more
mythology.
ridiculous will take its place.
I don't know. It's been around for a long fucking time.
I agree with Missy, but I also think that the current trend is nothing. Non-religious.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the next part of the cycle is going to be nothing.
Hopefully logic.
Yeah, that's like science.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
That's the
we can only
trend.
hope.
Yeah.
But I had a point. What was I gonna say?
Well,
Hi, Lex.
hi.
Hi, Lex.
Close the door, please. Thank you, dude.
Oh, little visit from Casey's nephew. That was adorable. Oh my god. We were talking about religion and the Bible and
Science.
But all right. So,
for science to take a spot again, the Dark Ages would have to happen.
I don't really want to live through that.
Because that's, again, cyclical.
we're getting dangerously close.
We are on the cusp.
And back to what I was going to say, the idea of the cycle and the Hobbit and Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings were kind of a direct response to World War One.
Right, because Tolkien was in World War I.
Exactly. So they were inspired by that.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Potter, I believe, would be a direct response to corrupt governments, because there's a heavy government theme
There's a heavy government, but I'm also
later.
thinking, well, yeah, but because you have to build up to those themes.
Yeah,
you can't just like.
But even
but it kind of did in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit,
because that was a very different era, written for a different audience.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Potter was written for kids, and Harry Potter, in my mind, the writing of Harry Potter was a direct response to J.K. Rowling wanting to make money.
She was very close to suicide at that point.
Yeah.
Like she had no money. She had a daughter she had to take care of. She started writing this as a bedtime story for her on a napkin.
Wanting to make money.
I would agree after 5.
Sure.
After the 5th on, yeah, it was all about making money at that point and completing the story and trying to do it in as big of a book as possible so you could charge a little bit more for it.
Well, the 5th book is where a lot of the political bullshit came around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was also her getting her message out at that point, or what she believed at that moment in time.
Right. Her true views have started to come out.
But I believe that theme was she wrote it during the 90s.
Yes.
Which was a huge response to communism, corrupt governments, the start and the fall of this idea of democracy and the republic. And that's kind of like when we got our second, in America anyway, our second impeachment in Clinton.
Yes.
And this idea of morality and stuff like that started to really come up. So it was a more complex idea. I forget where the fuck I'm going with this, because now I'm just going off. But the main point is corrupting government. There was a change in tide. Mm-hmm. It was more about inclusion. And
yeah.
Okay.
You see, you made yourself angry.
The idea of the novels were more about inclusion and so on versus.
But even then, and it is from what I have a limited knowledge of the books, basically just from the movies, because I can't be bothered to read the stupid books because her writing bothers me.
Okay.
There's not much inclusion. Even still, like, wizards are still just a very segregated population.
Yeah, it's.
Well, that was half the problem. Like with the whole political aspects of it, they wanted to keep them separate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then in comes Voldemort, who's just magical Hitler, and wants to keep things pure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even in the more recent films, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, they're great.
Ha!
First one's fine. I didn't see the second one.
Second one is horseshit. First one's fine, but this idea of what's his face, Grindelwald, wanting to break down that wall and allow Muggles or no mages and the wizards to be together, but with the wizards on top.
Right.
So if we had cameras, it'd be different, right?
It would.
Instead of just magical Hitler, he was just kind of, he wanted that caste system.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, let's get back. Okay. Because just out of curiosity, would you want to move this into the idea of like music and bands, and what would make like a classic? No. Okay.
That I feel like that's more nebulous than a novel or a film,
because music is much more
taste driven.
No, not even that. It's just musical taste and musical styles and just what is music is too populist determined.
There's still like a handful of people that you could pick out to say are classics.
Could you?
Yes.
Today, no.
Today, no.
No.
But
it's tough.
I mean, we don't have to talk about it. It's fine.
I guess the one thing I would bring up is the fact that music, although is cyclical, there is no direct criteria of what is considered a classic.
No. But that's why we would discuss.
Well, I'm just saying, there's, like, with novels and books, there's how influential it is,
There's themes and ideas and archetypes that can be,
you can find themes and ideas in lyrics.
You can, but I feel like there's different criteria between the two. And music just moves too fast.
My only argument against it is what I think of a classic is like Bach, Mozart, instrumental.
The ones that started everything.
Yeah.
But if you were to look at certain genres, like rock, you would automatically think of like specific bands who are considered to be like the classics of that genre, which I tend to not agree with anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, like, too much of music is stolen and appropriated.
Stolen's a heavy word.
Yeah, I mean, it can be reused and recycled, but that's as well as movies and books.
Because
there's only so many ideas people can come up with.
When you said classic rock, or rock, we'll just use rock in general, I guess, Elvis came to mind. The king of rock, right? But most of his music themes...
Sucks.
No.
You're quite wrong.
But most...
Elvis is horrible.
If we're looking at it from an objective point of view, he took a lot of his music and instrumentals from the blues, from African Americans, Harlem. A lot of that was inspired from jazz, and even the way he danced was also inspired heavily by that too. So
and not by some crippled kid.
Looking at you, Forrest Gump.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's more of a skyscraper than a town. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, films and movies are a town. They all kind of live together in this weird plane.
It's easily demolished and rebuilt.
Yeah.
That's
The
an idea.
The music industry built upon itself to the point of...
It's almost monolithic.
It was just an idea.
Yeah, we were discussing it.
Yeah.
Okay. So...
There's no need to get defensive.
I'm not getting defensive.
Calm down.
Everyone
You're hysterical.
Casey, calm down.
Jesus Christ. Alright, so then... Keep going then with books and novels and movies.
One book that I had to read for my Brit Lit 2 class, White Teeth.
Oh, Zadie Smith.
Yeah, Zadie Smith. I would consider that a classic now, and it was only written about 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that sound so familiar?
I might have mentioned it before.
What is it about?
There's these really white teeth.
Thank you.
I mean, yeah, there's a dentist in it. It's about a lot. It's like a love story, and it's also about racism and science. There's a lot going on in this book.
Okay. So then that would make sense as to its relevancy.
Yeah, there's actually a quote, because we read it right after we read Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, no, I take that back. We read Frankenstein first, and then we read White Teeth.
Get your shit together, Dave.
Dude, I could barely remember what I did yesterday. But it heavily implies that science is the new way, and to pursue new knowledge at any cost.
Which is fine.
Yeah, that's like one of the big themes in it. Pursuing knowledge at any cost.
Experimentation on humans.
That's a really good theme.
Yeah, actually,
experimentation on humans.
Yes, actually, specific genetics. That was the theme, because it's so...
CRISPR some bitches.
I have that highlighted. I remember thinking, I'm going to write my paper on this, and then I didn't, because I wrote it on Frankenstein instead.
There you go.
But I quoted White Teeth. And
Good job.
Pats for Dave. But I think that's going to be like an instant classic, because it was pre 9/11 too.
Okay.
And it was, it was pre 9/11.
So 9/10.
Was it pre 9/11? Yeah, no, it was pre 9/11. Shit. All right. Don't quote me on any of this.
Alright then.
Let's just sit here and watch David delve into madness as he eats his own brain.
I think that just went right over his head.
Yeah.
What? I don't know what's going on.
He's too lost in himself.
What's going on?
We were laughing at something else.
I made another funny.
Oh, I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy trying.
Yep.
Oh,
wow.
shit, now I lost my point that I was going to make. Damn it, Dave. You're stupid, it's contagious.
Alright, so what about Titanic?
No.
That's considered a classic.
It is a classic, but only because it made fucking millions of dollars.
It was like...
It's based off of a true story.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Shut up. My, like, great-great-great-grandmother was supposed to be on the Titanic. And then she didn't go.
Can't stand that movie.
It's like Romeo and Juliet on water.
But worse.
Better.
Yeah, there's nudity.
Everyone dies.
Some great nudity.
Yeah.
And also everybody dies.
Not in Titanic, Rose lives.
Yeah. But at least Jack dies.
Yeah.
And that was definitely on her intention. They both
No
could have
way.
fit on there.
No, they couldn't have. It's not about that. It's about the weight. It would have gone under.
He was third class. He didn't eat that much.
They tried, and it started sinking, you moron.
I was too busy paying attention to the nudity.
I'm thinking about it right now.
Anyway,
It's great.
Okay. Okay, so what about, like, classic, like, horror movies?
Easily The Thing.
Psycho.
Psycho, sure.
The Birds.
I would go Psycho over The Birds.
But I would
The
say
Bird-
The Birds is a classic,
The
though.
Birds is more funny.
But The Birds is a classic because it's the first, like, big movie to not use music, right? Wasn't that, like, its big thing? Like, there's no music in it at all.
I don't remember specifics, but this kind of I thought of something else. Alfred Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was he a one-hit wonder? Or did he have several...
Yeah, he's got a few.
Because the only other one that comes to mind other than Psycho and the Birds is The Rope.
Vertigo. North by Northwest, which is my favorite by him.
Okay, so he's more of a... Austen.
Rear Window.
Would you say he's like Austonian?
No.
Because he defined a genre?
He didn't define a genre. He expanded it because he showed more that there's also that you can include psychological horrors. Then you can have really layered, sympathetic villains in Norman Bates or in A Flock of Birds. And that it's if you want to get the best performance out of your actress, fucking abuse her. Have birds actually attack her.
Looking at you, Tarantino.
No, he did this.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm also looking at you, Tarantino.
Got good acting.
What did Tarantino do?
Didn't he do something in Kill Bill?
No. I can't think of anything.
Alright, never mind. I retract my accusation.
Silence of the Lambs is a classic.
It's great.
Yeah.
But the other movies in that series...
They're awful.
Right. So what makes that one a classic compared to the others?
Because it was the first one. And all the other ones tried to ape off of it. And that's why they tried to imitate and copy it. Even Thomas Harris, the writer of the books and the movie, and the one that created the idea, everything he wrote after Silence of the Lambs was just aping off Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And then we got a huge redemption with Hannibal the show.
Yeah. I'd say if they didn't cancel it, that would have been a complete classic. And I mourn that loss.
Still
So
so
does Casey.
man.
Yeah.
Season 4 would have been Silence of the Lambs.
Abby's upset too.
Sorry to bring that up. I'm trying to think of other classics.
Mads is best Hannibal.
Sound of Music.
Here's the thing. It's bad.
I disagree.
It's awful. And I can't think of a lot of people that can sit through the whole thing.
I've never seen it.
And say it's good.
I liked it.
You're wrong.
I like
Fuck you.
I like the songs from it because that's about all I know. I can't comment on the movie itself, but I really like.
Julie Andrews.
It's tedious and fluffed.
But it's also kind of about World War II.
Yeah, fine. Nazis, meh,
Which was
bad.
Fluffed.
We get it.
No.
Nazis bad, but the hills are alive.
With the sound of music. Ah.
Oh, could that be considered a prequel for Silent Hill?
No, it couldn't do.
Why not?
I don't know.
I don't think Miss knows Silent Hill.
I don't.
So then, all right. So you're bringing up Silent Hill, but I feel like this is a topic for another day. If video games can be considered classics,
Zelda, Mario,
Yes.
I want to because I want to tack the same criteria for books and movies onto that.
But like you say, video games, like classic video games, those are the three I think.
But those are icons. Those aren't the games themselves.
Oh,
So
okay. I thought Legend of Zelda was a game.
that is a game.
That is a game.
That's what
Legend of No, you said you just name names, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I'm gonna
also
jump
Legend
off
of Zelda is a series. That's also not like a specific one.
Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, that's a classic because that's a fully realized story, and that also helped to like revolutionize gaming because it was one of the first big 3D sandbox games.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll stick to movies and books then.
No, but I think you could stick the same criteria because it's story based.
Yeah, because I would want to like dive deep into the way games have gotten so cinematic and character driven nowadays.
I don't mind the character driven part.
Like with God of War and ones like that.
God of War. I'd even
Dad of War. Boy.
That's how I got my nickname.
And even as much as I dislike superhero stuff, that new Spider-Man game, I want to think of that as becoming a classic just because of even though it was dumb Marvel writing, it was a good story. It was a good dumb comic book story.
Well, then in terms of superheroes, I'm kind of thinking like, because they're all pretty much the same.
They're all very much the same.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of superheroes in general, but like I don't see the Avengers becoming a classic. But like if I were to think of what?
No, go ahead.
Okay. If I were to think of like superheroes who are classics, I would think of like the first ones. So like Captain America. Superman.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say the first Avengers could become a classic because it did something that a lot of movies couldn't. It was like a climax to establishing.
No, I would disagree on one thing. It didn't do it well.
It didn't do it well, but it did it. It was the first to do it.
I'd argue that Infinity War and Endgame.
Infinity War, absolutely.
Would become,
Endgame, no.
You gotta put them together.
You unfortunately do have to put them together, but of course, Infinity War is stronger because it's the culmination of that 10-year trip.
Yeah.
But the first Avengers did bring together several narratives.
Yeah.
I still don't see it ever becoming a classic. I would argue Infinity War over Avengers.
Yeah, but
because
within superhero movies, yes.
No, overarching. I think as a classic as a film.
Oh yeah, Infinity War, absolutely.
Is because it brought together several stories along with still maintaining relevance.
A decade-long story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you didn't have to know the story going in to understand and enjoy the movie.
You didn't necessarily need that for the first Avengers.
I feel like you needed it more for the first Avengers than you would have for Infinity War.
Honestly, I don't even remember the difference between any of them. They all just kind of blend.
They
do.
What about Super? That was a superhero movie.
Bolty. Oh man, I love Bolty.
That was a superhero movie.
It was.
What's Super?
Oh.
So the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies,
James Gunn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One of his earliest movies is Super. Rainn Wilson and Ellen Page and Kevin Bacon are in it.
Kevin Bacon is in it.
He was the bad guy.
Oh my god, he's a good bad guy.
He was great.
Yeah.
And Rainn Wilson is a fry cook who kind of goes off the deep end when his wife relapses into her drug use and is kind of basically kidnapped by Kevin Bacon, who's a drug dealer in the town. And
Bolty comes along.
Well, yeah, Bolty does help make the Crimson Bolt a thing. Rainn Wilson constructs a
I love Bolty. And I shouldn't love her, but like I do.
She's great.
But she's also a criminal.
They're both criminals.
Yeah.
Rainn Wilson ran around the town with a monkey wrench, pounding people in the fucking face for jumping in line.
I wish you had filmed my reaction for... I know. But for that particular scene.
Dave should watch that.
You so should.
Shit.
Yeah.
It's great. It's bonkers.
It's really good.
Instant classic?
Yes.
Okay.
No. To you, maybe, but not to the
Instant
world.
cult classic.
I'm using it sarcastically.
Okay.
Instant cult classic. Because that really helped to get James Gunn career off the road. Mm-hmm. And that's what got him like Slither and eventually the Guardians movies and Suicide Squad
2. No, it's just Suicide Squad. Right?
The Suicide Squad.
The Suicide Squad. Yeah.
No, we're not going to talk about Suicide Squad.
Anyway, we do need to watch like the Greasy Strangler because that's like kind of turned into a classic.
100% a classic.
In our little group, yes, but not in the world.
It's more like an inside joke.
It's a midnight movie classic.
Would you consider The Room to be a classic?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely ascendant at this point. It's like so bad, it's good.
So, okay, let me ask you this then, since we just talked about Hamlet not that long ago. If you were to think of Shakespeare...
Is Hamlet Johnny?
What?
Is Hamlet Johnny?
Johnny.
It's Tom Movie's character in The Room.
Oh, no, I was not going there with that. I'm saying, like, how you said, like, Jane Austen is considered a classic. Obviously, Shakespeare would be too. But if you were to, like, just pick one classic from Shakespeare, which one would it be? To be, like, a top classic of Shakespeare.
Unfortunately, it would be one of his popular ones.
Right.
Yeah. I think since he wrote in two different styles, comedy and tragedy, or two different themes, I guess.
Well, even in themes.
Could you say you could pick one from each because they both have different influences for different reasons?
If somebody says Shakespeare to you, what's the first play that comes to mind?
Honestly, Hamlet.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the first thing that comes to mind because of how complex and intricate it is for a play.
Case?
I would either go Macbeth or The Tempest.
See, I would go with Romeo and Juliet.
The Tempest, I think, is great because it's fantasy. Mm-hmm. It's in that vein of Midsummer's Night Dream, where it's just wild fantasy, and it's just so out of his comfort zone.
In terms of classic, though, I feel like those three that we mentioned, besides The Tempest, would be like the top classics of them.
And would be a good spectrum to describe who Shakespeare is.
Was. He's dead.
He's not dead, he just went home.
He went to the farm. Who Shakespeare
Look
was.
at the rabbit, Shakespeare.
Oh my god. Stop. Stop.
What?
Fuck that book.
What?
Of Mice and Men.
Oh.
Fuck that book.
Yeah.
Look at the rabbit, Shakespeare.
I don't want memes popping up on my phone again.
Anyway, but like notice how like we don't talk about like Midsummer, and we don't talk about Othello, and we don't talk about Much Ado About Nothing. You know, like
I like Much Ado About Nothing.
Huh?
I like Much Ado About Nothing.
You like it, yeah, but it's not considered a classic. You know?
No, because his comedy is real hit and miss, and it's definitely of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A classic has to be something that can have impacts and can have relevancy.
Right, and with Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet, I think that all of that counts for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like they all encompass little bits of both comedy and tragedy.
Yes.
Because you can't write strictly on tragedy without including some comedy.
Well, I mean, comic relief is in...
You need a breath.
It's so funny because the whole scene with the gravediggers, like, that's supposed to be comic relief, and I told the kids that, and they were like, what?
Yeah.
That's supposed to be funny?
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are...
Yeah, they're supposed to be comic relief, too.
Yeah.
They're the
so
Timon
not.
and Pumbaa
They're
of
so not.
Hamlet World.
Yeah.
Hamlet World.
Well, that's why they got their own spinoff. And they're hilarious in their spinoff.
I suppose. suppose. But yeah, anyway, those are some classics.
Or what we think are classics.
It's our BuzzFeed list of classics.
It's our
Watch Mojo list of classics. Top 10 lists.
Our bachelor degree in English list of classics.
The Chives list of classics.
And granted, we don't like all that we listed, but, you know, they are classics in our
Right.
society.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said with The Outsiders, I think it's bad. I get why. I get its relevancy. I understand it.
I'll take that, I suppose. But, like, even with Catcher in the Rye, I don't understand.
I don't
get it.
I don't think it has a place. I don't think it speaks to...
Nope.
And it's very much geared towards men.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like a dude's... like a guy's supposed coming of age story.
Yeah. So that one I don't understand, but you know it is a classic. So.
No, I'm a guy and I don't like it.
I'm a guy just being a dude.
I'm a dude disguised as a dude disguised as another dude.
Okay. Yeah.
Big Lebowski. That's who I. Anyway,
Yeah. So follow us on all the things.
if you disagree with anything we said, comment down below. Send us an email. Send us hate mail. You know, I'll get it, and I'll relay it to everyone. Yeah.
Except me, because I'll get upset.
I won't tell you. I'll just send it to Casey specifically.
That's fine.
Oh, good. I love hate mail. I love hate mail so much.
Like, subscribe, follow,
Comment.
share.
Buy
Tell
our
your
merch.
mom.
Tell your dad.
No, don't tell him.
Tell your sister.
Tell your mom I said hi.
Tell your brother.
Tell your grandma.
Tell your grandma I said hi.
She's an instant classic.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll
We got
see.
merch. We got like her shit.
Yeah, we'll see y'all next time.
But seriously,
For another classic episode of Struggle City.
tell your grandma I said hi.
Oh my god, you're weird.